Hey, this is Publishing Disrupted. Publishing Disrupted
Yeah.
is the name of the
Yeah,
the
you were
podcast that we
disrupted
do.
as you started saying.
I was
You
like,
disrupted yourself.
Wait a second. What is this podcast?
That's good. We need to disrupt ourselves.
We do.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, we're two former Christian publishing professionals, still mostly professional, I guess, in this place, but former Christian publishing, trying to talk about the ups and downs of publishing in general and moving toward the independent book market. That was not the usual.
No, that's
intro,
fine.
But I think
you
covers
just
it.
left out your name for those who
That's
haven't
true.
listened to the podcast.
I'm Mick
before.
Silva, editor Mick Silva.
I'm David Morris, a publisher and literary agent.
That's right. So that's who we are. And we come from, as I said, the Christian publishing behemoth industry.
That's our past. That's our dark past.
Our old selves. And yeah, we're reinventing. So a lot of people are in this boat with us. We keep finding them all the time. And we just hope to, I don't know, make a space for these people and trying to find, how to reinvent and do it well and do it authentically. I think that's my word for the day, probably authentic. We're going to get into a little bit of, from last time we talked about, we wanted to move into, just continue talking about some of the fun changes that have been going on and dig in a little bit more on, how to do this authentically. That's kind of where my mind's at. But you've been doing some traveling. You were at the Indie conference.
Yeah. So I run, and I founded Lake Drive Books. It's an independent book publishing company, very grassroots, scrappy, trying to appeal to the ex-evangelical, post-evangelical audience, self-help as well. I have a psychology background. I want to publish more psychologists.
Right.
So I attend the Independent Book Publishers Association meeting. They had their annual publishing university in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago.
Minneapolis.
Actually, 3 weeks ago.
It's a good book spot.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
Independent books.
Bunch of publishers there, believe it or not, and even like a book depository or something. Some kind of museum about
cool.
books is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what struck me was, it's a conference. It was well attended. I think they have well over 3,000 members.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I happen to know the CEO, Andrea Fleck-Nisbet of IBPA, and I heard her remark recently that a third of the books that are produced in the U.S. are by independent publishers.
Right? Wow.
Yeah. Now, granted, a lot of that's vanity, but then again,
Sure.
there's vanity publishing at all levels, believe it or not. People don't know that, but it's true.
Absolutely.
But there is a fair amount, I think, too, at the indie level, definitely.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty widely ranging group from authors who want to take matters into their own hands and do DIY publishing. And some get really good at it, especially in the fiction area.
Is that right? Yeah, fiction.
Yeah, because fiction is
representing.
much more like it's appealing to power readers who consume a lot. And
Right.
there's a lot of tactics that are going on these days, like publishing series of books is a great marketing tactic in and of itself.
Sure.
To people who are just publishing because of interests that they're really zeroed in on, whether it's children's books or books about animals,
Right.
I don't history books, what have you, something that's a passion for them.
Yeah.
They may be writers within their publishing enterprise, or they may be publishing plenty of other people. I'm one of those in a way because my passion is for reaching those who have struggled with institutional religion and they're trying to find their way forward in terms of identity, in terms of what they define as spirituality.
Yep.
What
great.
really surprised me about it is just how vibrant it was. I mean, some of the people there were indie publishers who've been in it for a while and they're quite successful, and they're probably $10 million annual revenue companies or if not higher.
Wow, that's great.
But there's a lot of independent startup types there. People with a very wide range of publishing knowledge. Some who didn't even know what BISAC codes are, which are those.
Oh wow!
Which are those codes that you may not know what they are as a everyday person, but you might see them sometimes on the back of a book where there's like categories with slashes.
which booksellers use to then basically shelf the books.
Right.
Where they go.
Right.
But yeah.
And there's a whole discussion about that kind of thing too. But I was just surprised with, I saw just a lot of vibrancy, a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and how do we make sense of what's going on with that.
Right.
It's definitely being used widely in the publishing industry. I was really surprised at how many colleagues I ran into. I saw people there I didn't know would be there.
Really?
I ran into someone who's in sales, and we started talking, and we may actually, we're going to try to figure out if we can work together.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
I was really, really pleasantly surprised about that. For me, it's more of a place to go and just let new ideas germinate, and, how to do the business. Had a great conversation about audiobooks.
Nice. That's big.
Yeah. They're a much more active category, and the technology is there. It's a lot easier to make audiobooks than it used to be.
Right.
Typically, they're very expensive to produce up front.
Right. It's gotten a lot easier.
And there's a pretty good skill set that goes along with that too. That's separate. That's separate from usual publishing skill sets.
Voice talent and recording.
Engineering the files.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful for me. But just being around other people and sharing stories and how are you doing things. And I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed the most about being in the publishing industry is being able to be with other people in publishing. And because it's such a mysterious profession.
It is. There's
so many facets. There's so many contexts.
Yeah.
There's so much change that has gone on. So I just, that part was just very, nourishing.
That's good.
To be
I like
around
the
that.
word vibrant. I'm seeing that more and more too. And, I was just on vacation in Portland, Oregon, and seeing family and stuff. Of course, we go to, Powell's and we stop into the indie bookstores. And it's just great to see
the giant Powell's.
How much is available now. I mean, in what you say, like drilling down on specific topics. It's almost like endless how specific you can get on particular just niche interests. And I've always loved that about publishing, but to be able to see that that's still happening in a world dominated by the big five and Amazon. Anyway, I mean, we could probably go on in a while, but you also saw a really cool article, I think, on Substack, Dan Blank. I don't know if you want to share some of your takeaways on that, but when you sent it to me, of course I've read Dan Blank a while and always gotten good stuff out of it, as I know you have. But trying to make this shift, I think you need some of these people who are a little bit of an independent vessel, who help to interpret some of the more, I guess, monolithic that can seem like a monolithic culture when you're getting into publishing, and that's been my experience. But now as I age and get older in this, I recognize you can be pretty authentic in how you approach and go after what it is that interests you, how you approach publishing
and getting yourself out there.
Exactly. And still make money, still be able to do this profitably. Maybe not, to the levels that you would dream and love to have, but maybe also, I think there's no limit to what you could be able to do, depending on, your particular skill sets and interests. So Dan Blank was helping someone, and he's basically a marketer, coach, right? That helps people.
He is one of those people out there who is helping authors with their marketing work, with their platforming work. And
as they're just kind of figuring this out, how do I get a book in front of people, and how do I get them to see me?
Maybe it's better to say their audience development. It's not just the word marketing can feel pretty, loaded and
sure.
But it's much more. It's much more than that.
Yeah.
How do you establish an audience? How do you become known? How do you build on? Once you're known, how do you build on that?
Right.
Yeah, he's one of those folks that I think he's actually one of the more thoughtful ones who brings us deeper, wider sense of framework around what is it that you're actually doing.
Right.
That whole idea of creative shift is his title, and I don't know where he came up with that, but we were talking before we started recording here that I think a lot of the creative shift is about how do you think about these other mediums, and I think that's what he's helping authors do. Like the digital mediums are a new medium.
Mm-hmm.
They're a medium
like this, a podcast.
Yeah,
yeah.
They're a medium in their own right. Being on social media or having an email list, that's not. If you think of that as just marketing, you're missing the point.
Right.
Those places are opportunities to make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
They're different, but they have caused us, I think, to reevaluate what is the medium of a book.
Of books, right?
I think books are still valuable. People don't realize it, but people still buy print books more than they do ebook and audio by far, depending on the category. Fiction is higher with digital editions.
Yeah.
But
that's great.
The way we value the medium of books needs to be reevaluated.
Right.
And to be simply cynical about social media, and there's a lot of reasons to be cynical about social media. People use it, they abuse it, however, whatever you want to call it. But that, I think what Dan tries to do is help people see that's a place where you can show up, as yourself. It's just different.
Right.
Yeah. And so how do you value that? How do you understand that? I mean, how long have we had social media? 15 years in a serious way, maybe?
Sure. Yeah.
I think we're still kind of rewiring ourselves about how to work with it, and it certainly has changed a lot as a landscape.
Well, right, yeah. Different platforms have different, characteristics and qualities. Yeah. No, I think and for Dan, I think I say marketing just because that's the big overall, awning over what he does. But yeah, it's publicity training. It's a lot of like figuring out, and authentic's the word, so I'm just going to go back to it. But like figuring out who you authentically are as a writer, as an artist, as a creative person, and then honing that or fitting it to the particular outlets and platforms. And I think there's just a lot of work involved there, like to figure that out, first of all. So we start typically with a vision form, at least I do. And I know you have this on the publishing side too, a vision form that helps to, and whatever you call it, maybe it's a publishing document, but it helps to kind of identify why are you doing this? What is it that's in your, wheelhouse to then put out in terms of helping people get to know you? And then we'll fit that to the platform, whether that's a podcast or, typically I think you're going to need to have a Substack or something that gets your words out there, even if you're just doing excerpts from the print material, that's fine. But, for some people, they're going to be very personable. Others are going to be erudite and teach as a professor. His example in here is a professor at graduate level, but wants to bring her message down to earth and make it more accessible to people. So she's teaching grammar from a bathtub and taking a video of that just because it's interesting and fun. And so you can build an audience based off of this, because that's a fun juxtaposition. It takes a little while to come up with that format, but once you do, you can put those videos on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever, and figure out how to do that. It's a little bit of work, but it is ultimately way more fun. What I came away with from this post, and we should probably put it in the notes for the show, but like I came away with understanding that what you're authentically into and what your book is about can be a launching pad for this, basically building a wider audience through these mediums, whether that's a podcast or Substack or Facebook. And it doesn't have to just be a marketing device to sell your book. That's obviously what it is, but it's another way to get your message out there rather than feeling like it's an exploitative thing and stealing your time at the end of the day.
And exhausting. And draining.
And you're like, I didn't make any money off of that because I didn't sell any books. Well, but you're building an audience and you're getting your message out there, which is what you hoped the book would do. Yeah. In some cases, it's even bigger than what the book will do. Yeah. So, I do think we need to think differently about how we approach this.
Yeah. I will say, I think it's sort of like that funnel analogy that they use in marketing a lot. There's the top of the funnel, which is really wide.
Right.
And then,
right.
and that's where things like social media live, in terms of their impact, but it's also a place where you get really wide and broad, and you try to scale. You try to make it big.
That's right.
And that can have an effect. I used to work in direct marketing, and that was all about scale and promoting. And you only wanted a 2% response, and you had a business model that worked on a 2 to 3% response rate.
So crazy, right?
Which I happen to remember. If you sent out 1 million mailing pieces, a 2% response is 20,000 books. That's pretty good.
Which sure.
Yeah. So how do you find that model?
1 million people.
So social media is kind of like a similar model. Email would be actually more comparable.
Okay.
But that's a little further down the funnel, where the funnel's a little narrower.
Yeah. The people who are subscribed to your email list.
Right. Yeah. And then you might say speaking is even further down the funnel, where you're making, you have fewer points of contact, because you can only do so much of that, and there's only so much demand for it.
Right.
But the connection with the reader is even higher.
Yeah,
the engagement
stronger.
with the reader is higher. And that's where you get the more, the higher percentage of conversions to sales, to use business language.
Sure. It's more like 10 to 15% maybe.
Yeah. But they can all be moments, or they can all, at all levels of that funnel, can be opportunities for authentic communication.
Yes.
It's not necessarily marketing.
Right.
It is marketing, but it's also authentic communication. There's some authors, like Mel Robbins is one. She's got a bestseller right now. There's one my wife follows called, I'm forgetting now, The Holistic Psychologist.
Oh, okay.
And her posts are really strong with like directive things to understand and know about self-understanding, the way our minds work,
right,
the way we were brought up. And it's just, after a while of keeping on some of those topics and on that, what she's an expert in and what she enjoys writing about, the holistic psychologist, you learn things.
Right.
Now, it's not the same as an immersive book reading experience.
Right.
But it still has value.
Yeah.
And
the book's where you go for more.
Yeah.
If you're into it. Yeah, that's really good.
And this author that Dan's talking about, Sarah Levine, she's a novelist.
Okay.
But also I think an English professor.
Yeah, teaches grammar, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so word nerd, our kind of people.
She found something that she enjoyed doing, which was making videos. And I can't remember which social media platform. Oh, it was actually for Substack.
Was it? Okay.
She's posting her videos on, or they haven't figured that part out yet. She's working on the videos.
What's the correct platform for the release?
But she enjoyed sharing tips about grammar. Yeah. And she started in the bathtub.
Yeah.
But then it was like, well,
where do we go from here?
Now, does every one of her posts need to be from the bathtub?
Yeah, right.
That's a lot of.
That'd be a lot of baths.
A lot of prune-like skin.
But then Dan helped her to kind of think outside the box there and go, okay, let's just do strange, like maybe on the bus or on a train or.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is also capturing her in everyday moments.
Exactly.
Which is getting back to that word authenticity.
Which is a fun idea to say a grammar teacher is going to be, giving you a little takeaway from a rooftop bar or something.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's very cool because it is doing what she wanted to do, which is bring her message to the masses. And most people, I think that's what I'm trying to be an interpreter as an editor, typically, to an expert in a particular topic, and helping them make it more accessible to as many readers as possible. And there's some give and take on that, obviously, in terms of like how you define your message and what types of readers you want to get. If you're a teacher or someone, you're not necessarily going after, the children, you're going after the adults, and how do you teach this? Even aside from parsing that too much, I think you can get really granular about it and then lose the authentic voice. And I've seen that happen over and over. And I was saying before we started recording here, it feels as though that was happening in, what were we calling it? The conventional publishing world much more often than what I've found working after being in a big house situation, with individual authors and trying to coach them in ways to be more authentically public or accessible in their delivery of this information, bringing it down to grassroots level. I think that's what I'm enjoying so much about my life now as an independent book coach and editor. I don't have to ascribe to the typical conventional way of doing things. I can help them, find new audiences, yes, but dig down more deeply into that audience. And I find that the more specific you get, often the more relevant it becomes, the more universal it can feel to that audience, because you're being more yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
I think
there's something to that.
In the case of Sarah Levine, it's interesting because she's a novelist thinking about how she's going to promote her books and sell more books. But what she decides to do for posting is post about grammar.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
And so...
because she's a teacher.
Right.
So that fit her.
And that's what she knows. That's what she geeks out about.
Yeah.
And the novels themselves are more of an outgrowth of that.
Yeah. Would it be better, just hypothetically, would it be better for her to have a nonfiction book that's about teaching grammar? Like, say it was called Word Nerd and how to use grammar in your everyday life or something like this.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be a stronger sell? Just given what you've...
Yeah, of course.
We're nonfiction people, so it's probably we're biased.
But then it's not fiction and it's not stories. And I think that's where we kind of tend to break down, is that we don't see, like, that's like her writing fiction and wanting to promote it, and then her talking about grammar seems like seems disjointed.
Right.
But maybe it's not.
Maybe it's not.
Because that's what brings her passion, that's what brings her personality out, and that's what people respond to in videos posted on social media.
Yeah.
So that makes her interesting, that makes her fun.
And different.
She probably has her own style, and she probably uses examples from her fiction writing or from other fiction writing.
There you go. That helps.
So, and then I think perhaps there's something endemic to readers of fiction where they care about things like grammar and language.
That's true. It's literary fiction too. I'm remembering.
Is it? Okay. Yeah.
So that does make more sense. It's still something of a side door into talking about literary fiction, right?
Right.
So I think there's something to that as well, in that, like Dan understands, you don't want to just go straight forward and talk about your novel and the characters in it. That's not as interesting as talking about grammar in the bathtub.
But how do you apply that to other contexts? Let's say you're a spiritual nonfiction writer. What do you talk about on social media? What interests you?
Right.
How's
your approach?
I often bring up Barbara Brown Taylor, and I'm not even that connected to her stuff right now. I'm not reading her stuff, but I do see her Substack posts.
But she's a good example.
And she writes a lot about her farm life. And maybe she's outright writing about that in her most recent book. I'm not sure. But I think what makes it interesting is she's writing about maybe the peace and the connection to nature.
Nature, definitely.
That she's finding in her farm life. And that makes her interesting.
Yes.
And that makes people more interested in her as a thinker, as an evaluator, as someone who can express spiritual meaning in the world that we live in today.
We see that a lot.
And then, there's her bio that mentions her book, that maybe the book talks about something completely different. Maybe it's about a trip she took to, Iceland or something, and learned a lot of things. Yeah. But so those things, farm life in Iceland, might be disconnected, but I think people can still see the pattern there. Without having to think about it outright.
Yeah. That's almost a underlying literary metaphor that's gone after. I was saying we see that in our side of the industry a lot. Talking about spiritual matters is uncomfortable when you're coming out of what used to be kind of a fundamentalist or just high control. I've liked that term recently. High control religious environment. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk, because that's all you do in those environments is talk about your faith and talk about your faith walk and all of that. So nature and I've heard the word rootedness, like getting back to our roots, right? And original ideas. Even authentic as a word is very useful. It's rich. And we're trying to bring back some richness to a spiritual pursuit and extract some of the less authentic, more commodified and sort of Americanized version of spiritual practice. So I think, nature and...
Just look at an example of yourself, if you don't mind me shifting that.
Oh, sure,
pointing it back toward you. You're working on and almost have completed
a novel.
A work of fiction.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I won't say anything about it. I'll let you,
who knows
I'll
what
let
it
you
is,
say what you want to say there. But then you also post things like, particularly you do long posts on Facebook.
I do, yeah.
But they're not the same thing. You're not posting the stories from the novel on Facebook.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the ideas that drive some of the characterizations that I'm using, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes you see things culturally too that are relevant to what you're writing about, and then you just comment on that, you know, because there's maybe an underlying pain point or a tension, or there's so much ideology out there now that I like to point at it and say, you know, this is not ostensibly what Christianity was meant to be about. This is more American. Like there's just a difference there in terms of the cultural understanding of what is Christian and what is American, and we're having a real debate about that ideologically in America.
What are we
right
deconstructing?
Now.
Is it Christianity or is it frickin' America?
Or
everybody?
is it American? Yeah, exactly. Like if you were
it's
a Christian,
the cultural stuff around America,
right? If you were a Christian in any other time in any other place in the world, it wouldn't look like this. So, let's just talk about that. So that's what I'd like to post about. The novel, it grows out of that because it's about my early experience, fictionalized, and a character trying to figure out like which is the real Christianity, like what does that mean? And of course you can't unpack it because it's so particular, it's so different, and ultimately don't give away the end of the novel. Basically, he just decides that you got to live your life and enjoy it, and I think that's where a lot of people come to. It's not anything
that is a big theme right now.
Deeper than that. You know, it's like the Thomas Merton approach to being a monk, like just, or Brother Lawrence, like peel potatoes and wash dishes and love God in the midst of that.
Right. Brother Lawrence.
It doesn't have to be like as complicated as we make it. But to your example about Barbara Brown Taylor, I think talking about nature and getting back into the roots of where we come from, just in terms of like being skin sacks, like we are, we are mortal, and we're all mortals.
That definitely reduces us to just basically that is what we are. We're
you're going to be
skin
worm
sacks.
Food.
Like I think the world is 4.3 billion years old. Everybody, we are just skin sacks. Come on,
exactly. And
get over yourself.
Yeah, you don't have to make it so high
Buddhist.
and mighty, I guess.
Yeah,
it's very Buddhist.
Yeah,
I appreciate her Buddhism. But yeah, we could list a ton of authors who go into that space and just approach their, I guess, publicity or their more, public-facing self.
But I think just let's take the example of you for a minute. Like your posts, particularly on Facebook, they establish you as a thinker, a cultural critic, maybe within a very specific arena. Not someone who's writing op-eds for the New York Times. You can be, you can be thoughtful about the world that we live in, a noticer.
Right. Yeah.
There's a very big space that can be occupied between being a learned, seminary-trained pastor, trying to talk about spiritual themes, and the everyday person, and sometimes that relationship is very fraught with big issues, especially in American Christianity, of hierarchy and power, and a what's the right word? Disempowerment of the everyday person.
Good.
And I'm not just talking about Luther and priesthood of all believers and so on, but because sometimes everyday people will, in this literalism movement that we have in American religion, will take priesthood of all believers to mean, I'm an expert on the Bible just like anybody else. And that's a whole other thing. But being able to sort of be a whole person and think about your relational ethics, think about how things affect you. You're doing that,
right?
And establishing an authority there, that is needed but also I think points people in the direction of, well, what else does he have to say? He's got a book,
Sure.
that talks about these things from a fiction point of view. You're not just a storyteller and a novelist.
Right.
You're a thinker.
Right.
And that's how you're showing up authentically on social media, and you enjoy doing those posts. And
Right.
so that should tell you something, and people are picking up on that, and that's how you're going to sell books eventually.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, and hopefully not just exclusively to Facebook. I'm not even sure. It wasn't even conscious why Facebook, because honestly,
Right.
I've wanted to leave that so often.
And that's the best way. If it's not conscious, if you can figure that out. I was talking to an author yesterday about that. Like, I was saying to them that you do posts almost like it looks like you're doing it on an unconscious level.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant.
Well, thank you. I'm not trying to do it.
Well, I've seen that to her, not you, but that applies to you.
No, yeah, exactly. I think it is something that ultimately that's what I'm trying to get to is that authentic space of, like, I didn't even consciously, think about writing this. It just came out. This is something that I talk about with my
but not
authors a lot.
impulsively,
Not impulsive.
not
No,
knee-jerk
that's
like,
very different.
not
very
not different in a
It depends where it comes from, right? So the motive that I'm starting with is themes. I see a connection with a particular event that just happened that's a newsworthy item to talk about, and it connects to a theme that I think we need to explore.
not an inflammatory theme.
Not an inflammatory way, and typically I'm not trying to go from one side or the other. I'm honestly trying to be a moderate, or at least be a mediator or a bridge. I think of that very often. How can I bridge the gap here between what it seems like some people are missing each other talking about? How can we talk about the real issue here, which is that we all have problems, or that we're all like not sure what's going on, and we want to be so certain.
Right.
We want to have an idea of like, well, we have the right answer and we're going to, go forward with it.
Yeah.
We all want to be right. And I often want to say, well, is it more important to be right, or is it more important to be kind? And how do we be kind first? And if we can do that, then we're doing at least no harm as we go forward, like the Mr. Rogers approach to life that I try to take. But then let's also talk about something. Let's also be like what Barbara Brown Taylor would talk about, like learning in the dark. Like I love her approach to things, because it's like we all have some darkness. We all have experienced some darkness, some grief, some of the things that make it really difficult to connect with other people about. But if you don't fear it, if you will go forward with it open-handedly and talk about it honestly, then you can make a connection with someone rather than feeling like you're superior to them. Like, that's such a cheap way to feel good.
Like you've mastered your darkness. And
like, give me a break. No one has. And anyone who's telling you they have is lying to you.
In fact, your darkness is where you can find some creativity.
Some of the light. Exactly right. Yeah. And that's where it shows the brightest quite often. So if we can do that as a community, at least in a small community, I mean, the people who read my Facebook posts, there's not a lot of them, but the
more
people
than
who...
me. You have more than me.
Yeah, the people who comment on it, they're wonderful thinkers, because they actually are willing to engage with something that's a little deeper than your typical Facebook post, right? And hopefully is at least a off ramp from the typical cultural freeway, or super highway of like, just get mad at the people across the table from you.
That's a great word, off ramp. You're causing people to stop, pause, go off of the mainstream superhighway.
That's what we're all trying to do.
And I think that signals to them that maybe I want to read a 75,000 word manuscript,
a
by
longer
this person,
form
because
article,
I can live for 2 weeks of book reading where I'm in an off ramp that's teaching me something about myself, or helping me think through some things.
And if you're that kind of person who's already doing that and already enjoying it, well, then that's like a signal to you to go, oh, this is someone who has more to say.
So we're talking about something that's very different than here's my book cover.
Right.
Here's what my story is about.
Or
here's a
cover
excerpt.
copy, or
We're talking about some in terms of how you apply yourself at that top of the funnel, social media level, if not a little further down, in email level, and and so on.
Yeah. First steps, I think, is identifying what makes you want to do this, because that's where I start with motive. And I think I said, like, part of the issue for me is figuring out, is this a pure motive for me to want to write a post about it, or is this coming from me? coming from me in the sense of like what I've just experienced. And typically you're trying to merge those things, but I said the word, not intentional. I hate the word intentional, by the way. I much prefer like integrative. And if you're being integrative with what you're experiencing now to what you're like, I'm looking at it as in terms of a theme. Is this an interesting theme that I want to explore? Is this something that's bringing up something from my past that I could share that might be relevant to people now? Those types of thoughts are where I start in terms of the funnel. And then from there, hopefully, as conversation gets started, as other people connect with it, and they're like, oh yeah, me too, I felt that way. Then I can start to refine that idea. And hopefully that, makes its way into, an email or a Substack or something a little more pointed and direct.
That's really good. Like, not liking the word intentional, which sounds like you've got something to sell. You've got a program you want to give people.
It's like an agenda.
And that's not what's working on social media. That might be appropriate for
people see it a mile away. You don't want to do that.
Spaces, right?
Yeah.
Where they're paying for a workshop or something like that.
Sure.
You want that.
If they've already opted in, give them what they paid for.
Right.
But not at the top of the funnel.
But integrative is more about where are we now in this present moment on this little tiny device, on this tiny little social media post that will live in memory for about 20 seconds.
As soon as they scroll past it.
And
yeah. What's going to grab someone and say, this is different? Right?
Yeah.
I think that's often what we're starting with at the top of the funnel.
And being integrative is about being in the present moment, being honest.
Right.
Not trying to, just having it, being more like a conversation.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like what we're doing in this podcast too, by the way.
Well,
I've been thinking about that.
Exactly.
Because we're not
trying to sell something.
Yeah, we didn't come here with a big plan of what we were going to talk about.
Right.
But we know that when we talk, things come out.
Things are generated.
Yeah, because we've been doing this privately to just sort of like support each other. And we felt, maybe we could take this into a medium as well.
And that gets to something I always tell the authors, that they're not buying the book, they're not buying the topic, they're buying you,
the person.
They want to know who you are, what makes you tick, and why are they doing that? Well, it's because they saw something that was authentic there, that they're going, how do I define my life? How do I live now? That person's found a way to live. I really like the way they live. I want to learn more about that.
Right.
That's why they're coming to the book. And that's a very different place to be than if you're like looking how to sell more books. Right. So anyway, we always get to a really good spot and then we need to stop.
Yeah. Well, this is very, actually, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
If you're an author figuring out that what authenticity means to be in online platforms, it's there. Seek it. But you better be doing it 2 or 3 times a week, and you better be doing it on 3 or 4 platforms, and you better
the publisher. Yeah, that's right.
Well, you can also be systematic about it.
Yeah. Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever.
There's a psychologist, Erik Erikson, from the mid 20th century. He wrote Child and Society. He was very popular, but he had this phrase called disciplined subjectivity, and it was like the Margaret Mead concept. I don't know if she invented it, of participant observation.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But I think in social media, it's how do you be disciplined and unconscious about it at the same time.
Both of those things.
Yeah.
That's right.
Playful.
Yeah. That isn't it's not easy for anyone, but I would argue the best authors, the authors that I enjoy the most, are doing that.
If you set a goal for it, but you can hold it loosely. It at least prompts you to get started, and then the playfulness can kick in.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you just wait for the playfulness to come, it won't come.
No, I think that's true. Yeah, it starts with kind of taking that first step, and maybe that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. I mean, that's in the Dan Blank article too. So do check that out. I'll put it in the show notes. Yeah. And look forward to talking next time, and keep on the journey, my friends.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Thank you, Mick.
All right. Thanks, David.
Thanks for letting me ask you questions.
All right. See you later.
Bye.